The Mummy is here to show us that painted clothes are a bad idea. From the sandstorms all the way to Brendan Fraser's glorious hair, how good was The Mummy? Welcome to Dodo's Horrorness. Today we're talking about The Mummy that came out in 1999, and it stars Brendan Fraser as an adventure-seeking gold digger. A literal gold digger. Today we're counting the Gore versus the Boar, which is the good of the movie versus the bad of the movie, and at the end we're gonna see how many total points it ends with. In the beginning, we meet Imhotep. We see how he became a mummy, and the reason is because he was in love with the pharaoh's girl. Now the pharaoh was very protective of his girl, so what he did is he had her, instead of wearing clothes, she was just wearing paint all over her body. That way if anybody touched her, he could tell because it would smear. But Imhotep does not care, and he still kisses her anyway, and then he rubs on her shoulder, which smears the paint. The pharaoh finds out about this, and when he confronts her about it, Imhotep comes from behind him and stabs him. Now this is the pharaoh, so obviously this is like the highest crime you can commit here. So before the guards come to take him away, on Moon, she kills herself right then and there, and Imhotep leaves. Now they don't tell us how he escaped or what, but he gets a hold of her body, and then he tries to use the Book of Death to bring her back to life. Right before he's about to revive her, the guards come and get him one more time, and this time they take him into the room to be mummified. They give him the worst of punishments, which is called the Humdai. The only problem with the Humdai is that if he does get revived, he's going to be super powerful and he's going to bring all kinds of plagues with him. Which, if you think about it, it doesn't make sense. It's like, this guy did something real bad, so let's give him the chance to be the most powerful creature in the world. Regardless, they do it, and obviously things go wrong. And then right after he gets mummified, they show us the statue of Anubis, how it was back then. And then we get a really cool transition into 1923 when the movie takes place. That whole intro as a whole was a really good way to introduce us into the movie's baddie, which is Imhotep. Now it's 1923 and we meet our main character, which is Rick O'Connell. You also meet Benny, who's his buddy, and they're at this place where they're about to have a battle. Now before the other people come and attack them, Benny runs away and leaves O'Connell by himself with the rest of the army. They get overrun, so O'Connell starts to run and he's the last one alive. Besides Benny, because he locked himself in a room, so he's fine. While they're chasing him, O'Connell makes it to the statue of Anubis, and then he's just standing up against it. Right before they're about to kill him though, some paranormal activity stuff happens and all the horses get scared, so they all run away and leave him alone. Then we meet the main girl, which her name is Evie. And then she does that cartoon thing where you knock all the columns of the library down, kind of like a domino effect type deal. And then right after this, we meet her brother Jonathan, and both of them together are pretty funny. After Jonathan does a jump scare, he shows her that he's found something. She's looking at it and she opens it up and it has a map inside of the city of Hamunaptra, which everybody thinks is a myth. But since they have a map, they're willing to risk it and go see if it's true or not. Jonathan admits that he actually stole it, and they're going to go look for the guy that he stole it from to see if he can help them, because they do need a guide because they don't know what they're doing. They find O'Connell and he is in jail. He's looking a little bit more rough than he was when we saw him in the desert. He has long hair, a long beard, and the guards are just whooping on him. He tells them that if they do save his butt, because he's about to be hung this day, if they save his butt, then he'll take him to Hamunaptra. Now the guy that's in charge of the jail thing, he's not listening and he's going to hang him anyway. So Evie tells him, hey, he knows where Hamunaptra is, and if you let him live, we'll give you a percentage of it, and they agree on 25%. So they let him live. I'm going to give the movie an extra gore point here because of the casting that they have. Everybody from heroes to villains does an amazing job, and you can just tell that they were all having such a blast filming the movie. They get on a boat to get closer to Hamunaptra. The only problem is that Benny, his old buddy, is there, and he's taken a few Americans to Hamunaptra as well. So now they're having to compete with this other team to get there before they do. Now Benny, he is going to get a gore point as well because he is the funniest character here. Every scene that he's in has me laughing, and I don't know what it is about this dude, but I just think he's super hilarious. Now the boat gets attacked by some other people who are also looking for the key. They know that somebody in there has it, so they attack the whole boat. They're forced to fight back and they get overrun, so they all have to jump out of the boat as it catches fire. Whenever they make it to shore, they see that they're on different ends. And Benny has all the horses, but unfortunately for him, he's on the wrong side of the river. So O'Connell and them are forced to go rent some camels. So it's O'Connell, Evie, Jonathan, and the jail guy who are on this team versus Benny and the Americans. In the morning, they meet up at one spot, and Benny and the Americans are there. And they all take off racing to see who's going to get there first. Once there, they start looking for any evidence, as Evie really wants this book because she's a historian. Now the rest of the people are there because of the treasure that's there. Once they're exploring there, the jail guy, who looks kind of like DJ Khaled, he goes on his own and he starts exploring. He sees a wall full of like old beetles and he starts taking them off because he thinks it's blue gold. Now he drops one by his feet and the actual beetle comes out of its shell, and then it goes into his boot, through his skin, and it goes up his leg, and it just runs all the way up his body, all the way up to his brain. And then you see him freaking out and he just starts screaming and he takes off running. And he doesn't stop until he runs headfirst into a wall. I like the uniqueness of the beetle climbing up his whole body all the way to his brain. I thought that was pretty cool. Once they break through where they were looking at, a tomb falls down, but it's locked with a key. But they don't open it that day. They just go back to rest for the night. That night, they get attacked by the people who guard the Sahara. And they tell them that they need to leave or they're going to die. And they have to the next day to leave. And they say, nope, we're not leaving. So the next day, they go back to what they were doing and they open this tomb. And then the mummy pops out, but he's still dead at this point. But you can tell that he's still a little bit fresh, a little bit juicy. And before he died, he carved a message to everybody, and it says, "Death is only the beginning." Now, while this is happening, Benny and his team, they find something else. But whenever they're reading it, it says something about whoever opens this is going to be cursed. So Benny takes off running, and he leaves just the Americans and another guy that they have there. They open it. They each take a piece of what's in there. But with that stuff as well, they also found the book that everybody's looking for. So everybody that opened this chest, there is a warning that says, you are cursed and you're going to be used for the high priest to regenerate. Later that night, while the guy who found the book is sleeping, Evie goes in there and she steals the book from him. She uses her key to open it and then she starts reading from it. Unfortunately for her, she's reading the part that revives Imhotep along with all the curses. And then we see Imhotep come back to life. And then the guy that was sleeping, he wakes up and he knows that everybody's going to die. And then the first thing we get is a bunch of locusts just flying in. And they are forced to run into the caves because they don't want to be out there. Now, one of the Americans, he wears glasses. He falls down. And in a Scooby-Doo moment, his glasses break. So he can't see without his glasses. We got a really cool scene here where he's like in tunnels. And you see behind him some sort of shadow moving back and forth, back and forth. Everywhere he turns is like behind him. And then finally he gets attacked. It's a really cool scene that introduces us to Imhotep as the mummy. And then while running, Evie, Jonathan, and O'Connell, they stop somewhere. And then Evie turns around and she pushes against the wall. And it's like a trap door. So she goes in there and gets separated from them. Whenever she sees where she's at, she sees the American that got attacked. She goes up to him. And when he turns around, he's missing his eyes and his tongue. And then she sees the mummy. And then O'Connell finally finds her, and he goes up to her and tells her, hey, what are you doing? And when he turns around, he sees the mummy, shoots him one time with a shotgun, and then they all keep running. And then the people that protect the desert, one of them, his name is Ardeth, who has the tattoos on his cheeks right here. He tells them that this is what they've been protecting from for 3,000 years, and now because of them, they have failed. We see that good old Benny, he's still in there, and he's kind of trying to find his way out. And then whenever he turns around, he runs into Imhotep. In a pretty funny scene, you see him pulling out a bunch of necklaces that he has from different religions and different languages, and he starts pointing at him and speaking in different languages. Right before Imhotep's about to get him, he speaks in a certain language that Imhotep recognizes as the language of the slaves, and tells him like he's gonna be his slave and that he has some use for him, and that in return he'll give him some gold. So Benny is now Imhotep's sidekick. I love how Benny has no physical skills whatsoever. It's just his mouth either getting him in trouble or out of trouble, in this case saving his butt from Imhotep. They go back into town, but it's not long before Imhotep and Benny get there, and they find the guy whose eyes and tongue can consume, that he finishes the job. So that guy's dead. When they hear him screaming, O'Connell and them, they run in there to check, and they see the mummy there kind of regenerating a little bit of his body. They probably would have died here if it wasn't for a cat that appears. Imhotep gets terrified of the cat and just turns into sand and just leaves out the window. They tell us that it's because back in the day, cats were regarded as the guardians of the underworld, so they're terrified of them. Imhotep finds the next guy, which had one of those things, which is the guy that had the book. He sucks him dry, and then Imhotep starts to look more human and a little bit more powerful every time. He finds the third guy, and then he goes in there and does the same thing to him, and he's looking almost fully complete, but he's just missing a few parts, like kind of his mouth is still mummy-ish. And then he shows us how much of a creep he really is, because he sneaks into Evie's room while she's sleeping, and then he starts kissing her while she's sleeping. Now whenever she wakes up and pushes him off, O'Connell runs in, and whenever the mummy turns around, before he can do anything, O'Connell shows him that he has a cat. So once again, Imhotep turns into sand and leaves out the window. While they're trying to figure out how they can stop this guy, they start hearing some chants coming from outside, and when they look out the window, it turns out that Imhotep now has a whole army of kind of like zombie looking people. They find out that they need the opposite of the Book of Death, which is a gold book that's also in Hamunaptra. So they plan on going there and stopping this guy. Now before they can, they get overrun by the zombies, so they get in a car and start driving through them, and they start fighting them off. And then the last and fourth American guy that the mummy needs to be complete falls down. Imhotep approaches him, and then he does the same thing to him, and now he's fully complete. O'Connell and the gang, they crash, and they have to get off the car, and then they get surrounded by the zombies. And this is the first time we see Imhotep approach them, and they finally meet each other. Him complete now. And he tells them that if they give up Evie, then he'll let the rest of them live. They look at each other and say, look, he still has to take me to Hamunaptra, so we still have time. Let's just live today, fight tomorrow. So that's what they do. Unfortunately for them, Imhotep can't be trusted, and as soon as he grabs Evie, he tells the zombies to kill them all. But where they're standing, there's actually a sewer, so they go down there and escape. So now they know that they need to go to Hamunaptra because that's where he's going to take her. They go to this old man called Winston, and he's a pilot. The only problem is that his plane can only hold 2 people, and now it's going to be Winston the pilot, O'Connell, Jonathan, and the guy with the face tattoos. So Winston is driving, O'Connell's in the backseat with the gun. You see Jonathan and the other guy, and they're strapped to the wings. And it's kind of like a really funny scene because they're just hanging on for dear life. And Jonathan's terrified, but the other guy's having a blast. And then we see how Imhotep, Benny, and Evie traveled there. And it's via sand. You just see this big old tornado of sand. And then whenever it stops, you see Benny and Evie fly out. And then Imhotep forms from the sand, which looks pretty fun, but also very sandy. And I don't like sand. And then after this, you see the plane that O'Connell and them are on, and Imhotep sees that. This is where we get that iconic scene where he like does the big old wall of sand, and then you see his face form on the sand, and he's about to get the plane. So Evie kisses him to distract them, and then like it still gets them, but it doesn't completely kill them. So he's forced to stop by the kiss. And then the plane does end up crashing, and whenever they all get out, they realize that Winston has actually unfortunately passed away. And before they can retrieve him or anything like that, they realize that they're on quicksand, so the plane slowly starts to go down, and they do one last salute to Winston, and they keep going. While they're there, they know that O'Connell's there, so Imhotep revives some of his old mummies. And I really like the powers that Imhotep has. They're pretty cool. Those mummies come from under the ground and attack O'Connell and the gang. Luckily for them, these are level 1 mummies, so they're really easy to kill. We see that Imhotep has tied down Evie, and right next to her is Anck-su-namun's body, and he's getting ready to perform the ritual that's going to swap their bodies. And then in a separate scene, we see the weasel Benny, and he's over there filling up a bunch of bags with a bunch of gold, and then he's going and taking them to some camel, and he's going to try to steal some of that gold. This is going to lead to my first bore point, because I don't know where these camels came from, because supposedly this is like a place that not that many people have been to, and they think it's a myth. They don't think it's real, and not that many people have found it. And the first time they traveled there, they did go on some camels, but obviously they had to leave after, so they had to ride those camels back. And then this time, they traveled in a plane to get there, and Imhotep and them traveled via sand. So where did these camels come from? Now, O'Connell and Jonathan find the gold book that they were looking for, and as they're doing this, Imhotep revives Anck-su-namun, so now she's alive. Right before he's about to swap their bodies, he sees that Jonathan has that book, and obviously he fears it because he knows that that book can kill him. So he stops what he's doing, and he goes and attacks Jonathan. While that's happening, O'Connell jumps in and rescues Evie. There is a few mummies that he has to fight first, and then we do get some pretty cool fight scenes, as well as like the mixture of the comedy between the action. Like there's this time when he's fighting a mummy and he cuts his head off, and you see the body kind of juggling the head, and then like a baseball bat, he hits it with a sword. They mix all these pretty cool funny scenes together with the action, while at the same time keeping the dramatic music to show that it's still technically a tense moment. Now, Jonathan, reading from the book, accidentally summons a different type of mummy. These are like higher level mummies, and they have a sword and they have a shield and everything, and they're a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, and they go after O'Connell. Now, while he's fighting them, he's running from them and everything, and Evie tells him that since he summoned them, that Jonathan is able to control them. He tells them to stop what they're doing, which they do right before they kill O'Connell, and he tells them to go kill Anck-su-namun, which they do, and this pisses off Imhotep even more, so he once again goes after Jonathan. O'Connell goes and saves him by cutting Imhotep's arm off completely. Now he just picks it up and puts it back in like a Lego piece, which is kind of funny. And unfortunately for Imhotep, when that happened, he dropped his robe, which has the key that Jonathan needs to open the book. Now Imhotep and O'Connell get into a little tussle. Well, it's not really a tussle because it's a one-sided beating. Imhotep is just tossing and throwing O'Connell wherever he wants. But whenever he finally grabs and gets a hold of him, he's about to kill him. Evie has the book. She starts reading the page that she needs. She reads from it, and then you see some kind of carriage come. It goes through Imhotep, and then you see kind of like his soul leaving his body, but he's still there. And then O'Connell says, I thought it was going to kill him. And she's like, no, but now he's mortal. So whenever Imhotep approaches O'Connell, he stabs him, and you see that he actually feels this hit, and he begins to walk backwards into this black water, and you just see him turn back into the mummy and slowly sink in, but not before saying once again, death is only the beginning. I like this whole fight scene here at the end. Even if it does have like outdated CGI, I think for its time it still looks great today. So now the mummy is gone, but our buddy Benny, he's still around and he's still causing trouble. He's carrying this big old bag of gold that he has, and he places it on something and accidentally sets up a booby trap that locks the whole place, and it's about to like sink the whole thing down. So they all have to run and get out of there before they get trapped in there. Now O'Connell and them, they make it out, but unfortunately our boy Benny does not. He's there and then all the lights start to break, so he's just there in the dark with just a torch, and then you just hear a bunch of bugs come and approach him, and then you just see his torch dim down, and unfortunately he dies there to the bugs. Goodbye, Benny. Luckily for O'Connell and them, the camels are outside, and when they get on the camels, they start riding into safety, and they actually get the one that has all the gold that Benny was collecting, so they're gonna be just fine. And at the end, I'm gonna give another gore point to the movie just because of the way that it combines adventure, horror, and comedy so well, perfectly together. Like if I ask anybody, hey, what would you consider this genre? If they told me it's an adventure movie, a horror movie, or a comedy movie, I would take any of those answers because they do it so well. Sometimes you get movies that try to incorporate like an adventure and then that kind of falls flat. Or you have an adventure movie that's pretty good, but then the comedy's not good, or the other way around. The horror in a movie is not good, or in a horror movie, the comedy's never good. So this one manages to do everything perfectly, at least in my opinion. The Mummy ends with 11 gore points versus 1 bore point, giving us a total of plus 10 points. But that was The Mummy. As you can tell, I'm a little biased towards it. It's one of my favorite movies. I've been watching it ever since I was like 5 years old. I don't think there's been a year where I have not seen this movie. But if you guys are non-biased, let me know what you would give a bore point that I might have not seen, or something that you don't like about the movie. And don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and let me know if there's something that I missed that I should have given a bore point maybe. Like again, I said I'm biased, so it's kind of hard to talk bad about a movie that you love. And if you haven't, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me if you guys did. Thank you.